All right, so welcome to our Education Leadership Panel. I am so glad you are here joining us today with our esteemed panel, and this is the third of three presentations that we have done to promote the EdTA Capitol Hill Week of March 22nd through 26th to help prepare delegates from throughout the country, EdTA students and adults, to visit with their representatives and senators in virtual meetings. So yes, we are recording this session. And by the way, the previous two sessions, Going to the Hill and the ITO's really extraordinary presentation about everything you need to know about advocacy, will both be available tomorrow on the EdTA Capitol Hill registration homepage, which also includes all the toolbox items that you need to help get you ready, all your leave behind forms, very important forms that you, documents that you will want to share and educate with your legislators and their staff. So at that, my job here is to step back a bit. I'm going to ask a few questions, but at this juncture, I'm going to end that fabulous screen sharing show and introduce our amazing panel and ask them to say a few words, and then we'll get started. So on my immediate virtual left, mine anyway, is Sharon Chadwick. She is the EdTA ALN National Advocacy Leadership Representative from Nevada, and also co-chair of Nevada Thespians. Sharon, would you like to say hello?
Hi, you guys. So wonderful to have you here. We're so glad that you guys are stepping out of what we would call our comfort zones and trying to make all of this happen, especially in such a short period of time. I know that it seems like a daunting task, especially with everything that's going on in our world right now. But I know that it is also such an important task, and it's so important for you, especially those of you that are young people that are here, that, you know, your senators and representatives want to hear from you. They want to hear your point of view. They want to hear why arts is important to you. They want your stories. And I think it's super, super important that you are so ready for this. And that is why we're here, is to help you see if you have questions, how can we guide you and help you along the way. So thank you for being here and welcome, and we'll continue our discussion.
Thanks so much, Sharon. Michael Dain. Michael is the EdTA Advocacy Leadership Network representative from the state of Indiana. Michael is also a very recent inductee to the EdTA Hall of Fame. Michael was the longtime chair of the Ball State University amazing theater education program. Michael created lots of good teachers and put them out into the world. And he's also a great director and a great writer. So, Michael, if you have any words to say.
Hard to live up to all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, everybody. And again, the panel features teachers tonight, and that's why we're really excited to see that there is a next generation of us, people who want to have our voice at the table, who realize that if they're not at the table, that somebody else will be, and that the things that you feel are the most important aren't going to be represented. So rather than waiting for somebody else to do it, you're stepping into the void and you're saying, I want my voice to be heard too. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
I think that's all I have to say for right now.
For right now. And to the right, Helen DuRan Brennan. Helen is the Iowa Advocacy Leadership Network representative. She's also chair of Iowa Thespians Advocacy, also a Hall of Fame inductee. Helen. Oh, and also an EdTA board member. Thank you very much. Helen, please step up.
I'm just trying to see how many titles I can get by my name. That's all I'm doing, right? I'm just here for the title. There's not too much that I can add to what Sharon and Michael have already said. we are here and we believe in advocacy. We've been doing it for a while. We feel it's important. And we think that's what really important is that you feel it's important, especially as young people, because you will have a voice that people will want to hear. So it's very important that you climb on board, that you embrace it, and that you not be afraid to go out there. So if you have questions or things that you need, please feel free to talk to any of us, and we'll be more than happy to help you in any way that we can. We rely on you.
So thank you, Helen, because we are a small group. Small is necessarily not a bad thing. I think it will have its advantages. I'd like everybody to sort of unmute for a minute and introduce themselves, who they are and why they're here. So Addison, let's start with you.
Hey, hi everyone. I am Addison Blumberg. Most people call me Addie. I am from Pennsylvania, like I said earlier. I am a sophomore at Pennsbury High School, and I am here because I feel that arts education is so incredibly important for the development of not only my peers, but also for the development of those with disabilities. I shared a little bit of my story last night, but I'll share it again. So my little sister, Dakota, was diagnosed with autism when she was 2. And until the age of 4, she was completely nonverbal. However, I've been a theater kid ever since I was little, and I've been singing show tunes around the house. And Dakota learned to sing before she learned to speak. And it was through theater that she was able to find her voice, the tools that she needed to navigate her world, and just essentially everything that would eventually become her world. And it is theater. And it's done so much for my family that I want to continue to share that gift with the rest of the world. And I want all students to have access to that opportunity. Additionally, Dakota uses theater exercises today as some of her occupational therapy tools and speech tools. And they're such universal ideas that can really be applied to so many different fields that I feel that they really do need to be shared, and people need to learn about them and learn how to use them correctly. And that's why I feel that they should be in our education systems.
Thank you so much, Addie. I think you've made a case for theater not just as a civil right, but as well-care for healthy living. So that's really extraordinary. Thank you. Grayson.
Hello again. My name is Grayson Laure. I go to Dallastown High School in Pennsylvania. I am a junior. I forgot that for a moment. And I'm also a crew member. So I don't have as much experience being on stage, but I do have experience with the community that theater fosters. Theater gave me an outlet to connect with other people and also organize things. I'm an officer for my troop, so I get to help out with planning and managing our website. And that just means that we're doing a lot of community outreach right now. So even when we're not necessarily coming up with shows, we are finding ways to reach out to our community and forge those ties that theater is able to do, not just with shows, but also with, we're currently trying to read fairy tales out loud and play them in nursing homes and elementary schools, not for stages, not for fancy effects, just to connect with our community members and our neighbors. And I think that education is part of our future, and theater arts help foster that empathy and community that I think is so necessary.
Thank you, Grayson. Much appreciated. Janine Lopez, good to see you.
Okay, sorry, I was muted. Hi, I'm Janine Lopez. I'm in California in Ontario. and I'm the theater teacher at Valley View High School in Moreno Valley, and I'm on the California State Board as well as the ALN as the California representative.
We are so good to see you. Been a while. Andrea.
I was still smiling at Janine. Hi, Andrea Rooney. I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm the Pennsylvania representative on the Advocacy Leadership Network. And I'm also the theater teacher and thespian director at North Penn High School. And advocacy is something that I kind of feel like I've really been doing my whole life, because I've lived in places where theater was not a primary initiative or on the list of priorities. And so for most of my life, I've been advocating for theater. And I landed at a high school where right now we do have very big support in our community and our school board and our administration. But I also know that 10 years ago, we didn't have that. And a next election could take that away. So I think that there's always room to do advocacy. And I'm very excited that I met Addie last Sunday in an advocacy workshop that I had run for Pennsylvania. And then Grayson reached out to me today, and I'm good friends with the director at your school. And so I'm very glad that you reached out, and I think between us, we can pull together a Pennsylvania state group. And I've been looking for other people and to be part of advocacy in Pennsylvania. And it's been hard just because everybody is so trying to deal with COVID, with productions, with finding other outlets for theater creativity, as you were talking about, Grayson. So it's been hard to find that commitment, but it only takes a couple people to start something, to start a movement. So that's
right.
Great.
Thanks, Andrea. Ava Walsh, are you there? You see your name, but we don't see
I'm
you.
here. Sorry, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Ava. I'm from Gloucester County, New Jersey. I go to Gloucester County Institute of Technology. And I just think it's really important to advocate for the arts because I feel like my arts education was so important to my life. And I think it's really important that everybody has the same access to the opportunities that I did. And I just think it builds empathy and creativity and critical thinking. And it's just so important to education.
Well, thank you, Ava. And just so everybody knows, Marianne has issued her hello in the chat. And we are so glad she is. Marianne is the EdTA Director of Volunteers. And Marianne, I'm going to apologize out front because I probably got your title wrong. I get everybody's title wrong these days. But now I think it's time to just hear from our esteemed panel because they've got some advocacy stories. I'm just going to open that up and ask them, could you just each talk a little bit about your direct advocacy experience? And I know you all have slightly different stories. So I'll back up to Sharon again.
Well, I can, we in our state, as in everyone's state right now, things are in such upheaval. But I will tell you that when I began becoming really involved in advocacy, I've always been an advocate of the arts, and I never knew how do I go out? How do I tell someone how important this is, right? And becoming a part of this network has sort of given me voice to that. Not only for when we go to DC and talk to the politicians that are on Capitol Hill and that kind of thing, but also in our own schools. And for me, a lot of advocacy in this last year has been talking to other theater teachers about how to talk to their principals about the importance of their job, of what they do. And yes, being online is something that a theater teacher can adapt to because we adapt. That's what we do in the arts. We learn how to do that. And so trying to give those teachers the words to say to an administrator about the importance of their programs individually and what that does to our students. Like what, you know, look at the percentage of graduates, right? And people who have said, oh, you know, we have X amount of people that have graduated from ours, you know, this percentage. How many of those were in the arts? And people start to think then about, oh, it's not just what we call core classes. The arts are also a core class, and trying to turn those words around so that even though it's not listed as a core class in our state, the importance of it as a core class is starting to get around. And I think that that's super important. On a bigger level, like on a national level for us here in Nevada, I think one of my favorite stories was actually one of my very first times on Capitol Hill. And I had the opportunity to have an STO who was also an international thespian officer at the time when I was the state director and I went to Capitol Hill. And this particular person walked into one of our senator's offices, and we had always said, you know, you need to tell your story. We need you to talk. And he walked in and he was like, sat down and was just on earth, just talking to this senator. And the senator responded and talked back and forth. My student walked out of the room, looked back at the senator's door and said, I'm going to do that one day. And right now, he's working in Washington, D.C. as an aide for one of the senators in Washington, D.C. And that is like the beginning of an advocacy moment for him, because he stepped in, said why it was important to him in high school. He was in high school. He said, this is why the arts are important. This is what, and he even said to the senator, someday I want to do what you're doing. And the arts have gotten me here to be able to do this. And so I think that those kinds of things and letting people know the importance of that to you is 90% of our battle. We want to get out there and tell people listen to the voice, be the voice, listen to the voice, and they will listen. You just have to be willing to step out and be the voice. So that's one of my fun stories that I've had in advocacy. And I think it was really, it's really, really exciting to now when I go to DC and I look him up, he's like, hey, let's go have coffee. And, I have to, take a break. And he's like driving the senator's car. And I mean, it's like crazy, but it's cool. So anything is possible if we stand up and speak for what we feel is important.
Thanks, Sharon. It's not everybody that gets to drive a senator's car. So that's cool.
I didn't get to go in it. He just told me he was driving it.
Okay. Michael, what have you got on your mind?
When I was in college, I didn't know whether or not I wanted to be a theater major or a political science major. So I went to school back in a time when you could afford to maybe do both. And so this advocacy is sort of the perfect marriage for me of my two big loves in my life. I started out initially with a human rights group called Amnesty International and worked for them for about 10 years. I created a program called Artists for Amnesty, which kind of, again, kept the two worlds connected. And over the last, and then much like Andrea was talking about, the first two high schools that I taught at, they didn't have theater programs, at least when I got there. They both did have theater programs when I left because we must have said the right things and done shows that were impressive enough that they decided they wanted to support the continuation of those programs. And then when I eventually made it to Ball State to work in their theater education program, there were lots of different advocacy stories. I mean, part of them are some of the other stories that panelists have in terms of working with EdTA's advocacy efforts. I was a state captain for Americans for the Arts in Indiana for a number of years. But jumping back to what Addie was talking about, actually one of the groups that I've advocated for at Ball State, our students who are on the spectrum, I created a project called the PRISM Project, which it's a 10-week program in which we buddy up college students and college music ed students and college theater ed students with a student who's on the spectrum. And then after 10 weeks, they actually do a public performance that's always sold out, usually not a dry eye in the audience, as the audience is absolutely amazed by, you know, how when somebody stands up for some of our populations that maybe have a few additional challenges, how far they can come in a short period of time, and how the arts can become the language of their lives. So, in addition to advocating for all of the future teachers that I've been working with at Ball State, and providing them with the tools so that they can go out and explain exactly what it is that we do that's so special, so that other people will allow them to continue to do it and fund their efforts. Probably the most significant advocacy work that I've done has been for people who maybe didn't have a voice of their own, which were a lot of the students that I've worked with on the spectrum. So Addie, the fact that you have a similar experience was touching to me.
I think, you know, Michael, one of the really important things that you said is there are all kinds of different sorts of advocacy at all kinds of different level, and they are all meaningful because this is a little bit like an acting moment where an actor, and I will bow to my colleagues here, you have an objective, you want something from someone, right? When you, like as a character, when you want something in that scene. An advocate's work is somewhat similar. You want something from someone and you must convince them of what you want and why it matters. So that's my brief platform. Helen.
Well, so that's the problem going last. People say this things ahead of you that you had carefully planned to say, right? What the heck? I would say my experience is probably similar, and I totally believe what Jim has said, because advocacy for me probably did start when I was a theater director in a middle school that didn't have a theater program of any kind, and I created one, and I moved from that to my first high school program that had an after-school program, but no theater curriculum, and only did 1 or 2 shows a year. And so we moved to creating a theater curriculum and having theater classes at a variety of levels, and being able to do a lot of shows and participating in all of our state events, taking them to Thespian Festival for the very first time, to moving to another district, the last district that I taught in, that I had really worked hard there for 10 years, had a very successful program. And when I left to take a new position as an education consultant, was told that I said, and I have the perfect person for you to hire. And they told me, no, this would be a great opportunity to cut staff. And so I had to determine the best way to go about advocating for them to maintain their theater program, which in my case was going straight to a school board and overriding the principal at that time, but making the case for success and making the case for the benefits that it had for students and the community in general. So I've had those kinds of school experiences all the way up to now becoming the chapter director for my chapter and the ALN representative since the original group of ALN people. I sit on the Iowa Alliance for the Arts as an advisory for theater education. In that capacity, I mentor theater teachers who are new within their first 2 years of teaching. So I feel like it's been a constant advocacy program for me throughout my professional career. I'm an education consultant now, and I'm constantly I wear several hats. literacy and English language learners and other kinds of programs. But I also I am the consultant in the arts, and I'm constantly fighting for that little piece of the pie when it comes to how we present professional learning to teachers, how we allocate those dollars that go to those sorts of things. I also sit on the Iowa Department of Education arts leadership team. So I believe I'll probably always do this in some capacity or another. I think it's part of who I am now.
So the three of you, in some ways, you've already blown up a couple of my questions. You've sort of answered them in a way. So, but still, what do you think is what are the most important things that an advocate must remember to do in their meetings? Are there some very specific things that you think they should always do, and maybe some things that they should not do as well? I'm going to just open the floor because this time, Helen, you get to go first.
See, I just advocated for myself recently.
That's right. That's right.
See how that went?
You wanted something and you got it.
And I got it. So I guess I would say, and I'm sure that most of our tips are going to be similar. Of course, once Jim has gone through, and you have watched all these recordings, you know that you can't forget the ask because that's so important. But I think I always believe that, and I said this the other night in one of the sessions, you have to remember that you're building a relationship. Even if that person that you're talking to is the absolute opposite spectrum politically and philosophically than you are, you're building a relationship. You want them to remember you. You want them to think of you as an expert in your area, which is theater education. And sometimes you may not know all of the things, and it's okay to say, I don't know, but I do know someone who does. For instance, in the case of wireless mics, that is not my area of expertise. But I was able to say to this representative to approach him from not just the importance of wireless mics in theater education, but in all the small towns in Iowa that use them at the churches where we have our community meetings, and the importance of being able to have that accessible to us. And his ears perked up and he started asking me some very technical questions. And of course, I didn't know those answers, but I did know who did know, and that was Lori Baskin. And so I connected her with him. And so you will be able to do that same thing. And it's okay to say, I don't know that, but I'm going to get that answer for you and get a name. So I think those are the things, that are important to remember. Build the relationship, have them trust you. I have had them call me about issues before, just out of the blue. What do you know about this? Just to get my opinion. So I think that's really the most important thing, because that relationship will stand you in very good stead as you move forward with this.
Great. Michael?
Make sure that there's a balance of compelling stories that touch the heart, in addition to data. All decision makers make decisions, or at least justify the decisions they make on data, but you need to convince them with those compelling stories that they should really spend some time with the data in order to, make the decision that you want them to make. Stay away from other topics. Stay on topic, whatever it is you're speaking about. If you have some other political concern that you want to bring up, this isn't the time for it. This is the time to talk about the thing that you, in a very positive, very friendly, very collaborative sort of way, that you're going to speak during this session. You have to make sure to the things that are your leave behinds, make sure that you leave them behind, and tell them if there's things that if you have additional information or something, that you'll send that to them later. If there's a question that they ask you that maybe the data that you brought doesn't address, make sure that you let them know that you'll provide them with whatever it is that they need to have in order to make their decision. As Helen was talking about with Lori Baskin for a topic that she wasn't quite as familiar with, but it could be for anything. Make sure that you're someone that somebody would want to have a conversation with. And like I said the other day, that most of the time our representatives on every level, even in terms of your building principal, too often they're talking to people that have an axe to grind or something that is confrontational. The arts aren't, even if there's questions about funding or not funding, the arts are something that Democrats, Republicans, Whigs, any political party would find something about them that would be a positive for them. So you're already going in to talk about something that potentially they like. And if you've done your homework and you've done some research on the people that you're speaking with, one of the first things I always try to do is figure out if they have an arts experience of some sort or another. It's usually one of the first questions that I ask, which then in future visits, if not during that visit, there's already some information you have that might be, for example, Senator Brown in the state of Indiana used to be in High School Musicals. You would never think that watching him talk about the COVID virus on MSNBC, his wife was actually a lead. She played Lola in Damn Yankees. Apparently he was just in the chorus in My Fair Lady, but it's something at least that he knows what it is that I'm talking about when I go in to talk about theater, because he's done it. And it always makes the conversation a little easier to have. So do your research, not only in terms of what party they belong to or what bills they've supported, but are they part of the Arts Caucus? Have they had anything in their past history? Maybe their kids are involved in the school choir. Even if they don't do theater, so they at least have some understanding of what a performing artist or a performing student does. It just makes the conversation a lot easier, a lot friendlier, and you're more likely to get farther if you know just which buttons to push. My representative is Greg Pence, the former vice president's brother, and we probably don't agree on a lot of political things, but we both think that the military is important. People that are veterans are important. He was one. And so when we bring up the National Endowment for the Arts, mental health programs for veterans returning, perhaps with post-traumatic stress syndrome, he's very supportive of that. So you need to figure out where the buttons are that are the right ones to push in order to get the response that you want. And that's true of advocacy at any level.
Thanks, Michael. It just reminds me, nobody walks up to a podium and says down with the arts. It is very bipartisan, as I think I've said on each of the previous presentations. Yes, there's always a way in. Again, I'll say it for the third time. Invariably, if nothing else, they were in the marching band. So look for that way in. Yes, Sharon.
I'm just going to follow up on what Michael was talking about with that. When you are thinking about the asks that we have, as we have a list of things that are super important. We need to have our ask, right? I had trouble with that at first because I wasn't sure how I could relate to what this ask was. So it took me a while to look at the ask and find out how that ask affected me directly in my situation. And I think that, and my team that was with me, I think that each one of us kind of found certain things in the asks that were super important to our state. And so that's kind of how we also told our stories. So our stories related to, they were very personal, but we found something in the ask that was relatable to that story. For instance, the whole thing with like Helen was talking about with the microphones. We had done the research like Michael talked about as well. And we found out that one of our senators, his children were both involved, not in band or choir, but in theater. And we didn't know that. We looked up their personal life and we found that out. So when we started to talk about microphones, we talked about that whole situation of education and how the bandwidth was changing, and they weren't accessible and all of that. And what ended up happening was the senator was like, really? Wait a minute. Are you telling me that you guys don't have enough bandwidth in order to use the microphones that you have, and you don't have any money to replace the ones you have? And that's how the conversation got started. And then little did I know, but the next year, our whole district got a whole set of microphones through the CTE grants, because the senator went to bat. I didn't know that they did that, but all of a sudden this money showed up to get new microphones for people in our state. So it just really helped. I mean, I think that conversation and relating your story to whatever your ask is, kind of making it so that they understand why that ask is so important to you personally, right? And then that they will be able to relate to as well. The second thing that I think is super, super important is follow-up. And I say that because all too often, the first time that I went, I didn't know follow-up. Nothing ever happened. Except for this one student who actually ended up in Washington at one point. But there was I didn't understand the importance of writing a thank you letter, of sending a picture of us, like together, the picture that we took, and sending it to them and saying, thank you for your time. Or thank you for letting us, talk with the person that we talked to, the aide or whoever that happened to be. Right. And I think that those follow-ups are so important, because once you do that, if you come back again another year, or someone else from your state comes back and says, oh, I was, so-and-so was here last, and they will go, I remember you. We had a conversation about, and all of a sudden it has opened a door, because not only did you go in and do your talk and do your spiel, but later on, you sent a little, hey, thanks for your time. We know that you're really busy and we really appreciate it, blah, 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 blah. And that sort of spurs to them a remembrance when they see you again, or when they see someone from your state again that's asking for that kind of, those asks again. They want to hear it. They do. They're not. And I was so afraid at first. I was like, what am I going to say? I don't know what to say. I don't know what, But they want to hear from you. They do. They want to hear your story. They want to know, why is it important to you? And they don't always have the time to really think about that unless we come to them and say, this is important. And then they go, oh, you're right. This is important. Right. So I think that if you just don't be afraid of it, get out there and find something that's relatable, do that research, and follow up when you're done. Do something a week, 2 weeks later, something like that. Send a message, send a note, send a thank you, anything, just so that there's a little bit of an opportunity to open that door a little bit wider, and maybe you'll get another response even, So just go for it.
Sharon, I want to just add one thing about the ask this year. They're kind of wonky. Title this, title that, title two, F what. I would ask you students there are 2 sheets in the leave behind. One is a sort of a cheat sheet. It's a very, very brief explanation, title 4A, title 2, whatever. And then there is an in-depth sheet. Study those sheets, and Sharon hit it on the head, to find something to relate to those. And I'll give you an example. Title 4A, what is that? That is money for well-rounded education that can be used to build curriculum, for professional development, for stuff. In other words, for backstage stuff, or front of house stuff, to help build programs. So you can say, that Title 4A money, we could really use new curtains in our theater. We could use a new board. You can talk about that as something that's very relatable. Title I money, you can talk about that as a civil rights issue because that Title I money addresses students who are most in need. And in the current environment, whether it's your school or the school over in the next district that has a lower tax base and arts education, theater included, will be most at risk, you want to stand up for your fellow students and ensure that they have access. So all of those, there's a way in for all of those, but you do need to get very literate on them. And they're wonky and they're tough to get off book with. So you need to find a way in with those. I mean, they're hard for me. And I get them. So, all right. So we're moving along here. So I want to hear from folks here because there's just a few of you. Why don't you guys all unmute and ask the panelists a couple of questions. And Janine or Andrea, you're as welcome as anybody else to step in. Ava, we don't see you, but we know you're there. Anybody have some thoughts or something they want to talk about?
I just wanted to point out that I've been able to go to DC twice with the EdTA, and we did about 4 or 5 appointments the first time and the same the second time. And we talked to one legislator in all of those appointments. We talked to their staff for the most part, and that's not a bad thing. They are young, vital people for the most part who are very interested. And even though maybe you didn't get the readout sheet on them, they're well aware of what their congressman or senator is interested in. And then they have their own interests. And almost invariably, we ended up having conversations about their theater in their school, or in some cases, when we were in Senator Toomey's office, his staff was talking about, well, my parents took me to the Walnut Street Theater and they took me, I'm talking to some Pennsylvania kids now, took me to places in Philadelphia and stuff. And we were able to say, that's great, but guess what? A lot of students don't have parents who are able to do that. So this is why it's important to give money for the National Endowment of the Arts to be able to fund theater groups or fund students going to see performances and going to see theater, because not everybody had the parents that you were lucky enough to have. And sometimes that strikes a chord and they go, yeah, I went to a friend in college who, yeah, they'd never seen anything until they got to college. So yeah, that's important. So it's using those improvisational skills as well as knowing you're asked to like really be listening to the people you're talking to and then speak with them.
Thanks, Andrea. Do I see another unmute? And your theater people, don't be so shy. Janine, any thoughts from you, California?
Yeah, actually, I have a question. I'm looking for, and I don't know if it's in because I have so many files now. I feel like my Google Drive is screaming at me. So I'm looking for a form that has who I should have as have their contact information, because I don't live actually in the area my school is located in. So I don't know certain things. So I'm like, who should I be sending these emails to? And, the list kind of
help you with that. Gene, have you registered for the event yet? Because I'm a little behind, the day behind. Okay, yeah, so tomorrow, Monday at the latest, what I will provide you is the specific contact person for each of your senators and for your House rep, their name, their email, and their phone number. Now, the one thing I would say about that in general, I mean, I have this big Excel file. They are the designated person, but they may in turn, hand you off to somebody else, another staffer who's maybe their specialty is education or they're responsible for arts. So, some people have very, very specific schedules. Sometimes it's the legislative director, sometimes it's, another staffer. Not all legislators are created equal. Some have much more robust staffs than others. And we'll say for new legislators, they're likely to have the smallest staffs, frankly. Somebody like Dianne Feinstein has a huge staff, for instance. I know that for a fact. So I will get to you tomorrow. You have
okay. Awesome.
Okay. Other questions, thoughts? All right. Well, let me back up here. Because we're getting close to the hour here. So panelists, what advice would you have for first-time Capitol Hill advocates, whether it's Zoom or in person? There are some things that they must, besides taking a deep breath. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going first by order of last question. I'm just doing it. So I think a lot of it has to do with, I thought about this question, and I think it's really important that if you have the opportunity to have a team, other people like, Andrea is excited to have you guys join her team. Sharon will have some people, I have some people. And I think that's really important because you need to gather them together and plan as a team. What's been really successful with my Iowa team, and it seems to be when we've especially gone to DC, is sometimes people from the Alliance and representing other arts organizations as well and other arts genres, right? And so it's finding those areas with which you're the most comfortable in the ask or the things that you're going to talk about. And you plan with your team, say, hey, I've got this, I can take this one. And someone else will take the wireless mic issue and someone else will do whatever. But that you plan it, don't script it, but plan it like a team and think about what you're going to say. Go over all of the materials, the materials that Jim's providing you with in terms of the data and the things that are in the ask. Go over that so you're comfortable with all of those materials, but function like a team, because no one wants to hear one person out of a group of 4 be the only person who's talking. There's a group of 4 because you all have unique perspectives and skills and contributions to make. So plan and work as a team.
Michael?
Which also puts you in a position then where these are very busy people and the staffers are very busy. You don't want to be wasting their time. So again, even though you're not scripting your responses, you're at least making sure that you're aware of what the 3 or 4 key points that absolutely have to make it onto the table, that they do make it onto the table, and then just relax. Have a friendly conversation. Again, as Helen said before, and I think has been said by several people, this is a long-term relationship you're developing. And you may not be successful during your first time in getting exactly what you want, or you may not be successful for a number of times getting exactly what you want, but you will be successful in introducing yourself, in introducing your passion for arts education or theater education. And each time that you visit with any sort of decision maker, it's more likely that you're going to get a little bit more and a little bit more of what you want, because in addition to you becoming more comfortable talking about it, they're more comfortable talking with you. So once you've done the preparation that you're doing, you don't need to be really nervous. The regular people like you are, they have a job, and their job, regardless of whether it's at the Capitol Hill level or you're talking to your principal, is to listen to their constituents and see what their constituents are interested in. So you have some power in this situation. And I know the first time that people go to speak to their congressional representatives, often they're so nervous that they don't really communicate as well as they wish to. You don't need to. Just relax. As long as you're on top of your material, it's a regular conversation. And if you can make it seem collaborative, that this is in both of our interests, that this happens, you're more likely to get a positive response. But either way, they'll be very friendly with you. They'll be positive with you. Nobody's going to be, upset with you because you're coming in and asking for something. They're going to be very respectful, and frankly, for the younger people here, they're going to be a little wowed that you're willing to stand up to the plate already at this part of your lives, because most of the time they're used to seeing people that are a little closer to our age, the panelists' age. So it's wonderful that you're willing to do this.
It's true that legislators love students, and it is kind of a shame that you can't be there in person, because never met a legislator that didn't like a good photo op with a student.
That's
Look
right.
great. They'll put it up on the website, makes them look great. But I love what Michael and Helen are saying here about building relationships. This is a long game. It's not a short game, and that's how you should view it. Sharon, want to wrap us up with some comments here?
Wow. I don't have a lot to add. I think they've really, that is so important, the things that both Michael and Helen have talked about. And my biggest thing for you is just to tell you that, to remember that it's like when you go to a Broadway show, those people that are on, those stars on the stage, they're just like me and you. They're just people. They're just like us. And so although they are like, it can seem to be a little bit intimidating, it is like a breath of fresh air for them to get away from the floor, to get away from that humdrum everyday blah, 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 and talk and hear what you have to say and to get to know you. And they do want that. It is like a breath of fresh air for them. So be yourselves, make sure that the planning thing, the obviously knowing what you want to say, right? Practicing that. We all kind of have to practice. And I would suggest you do that. Whatever your particular ask is, whatever your story is going to be, whatever your part of it is, practice it, and practice it in front of your director or the person that's going with you or your team, so that you have that opportunity to get it out there before you, and it doesn't have to be the same every time. You don't have to memorize it. Just practice it so that you're relaxed enough to just have a conversation instead of making it like you're, trying to, I got to say A, B, C, D. If you don't say D, you don't say D. Who cares, right? You're talking to them. You're getting out what you feel is important. And just, if you know ahead of time, if you've practiced, chances are you're not going to forget the most important parts of what you're supposed to say, right? Because you've practiced that. So it becomes kind of like second nature, like learning a role, right? Once we do it over and over and over again, for some reason, it just keeps coming back. And it will. Just relax and be yourselves. Let them know who you are, because that's what they want. They want us to meet people. They're tired of meeting the politicians that they're fighting with, or that they're arguing, that they're teaming with, or that they're whatever. They want to meet us. They want to know who we are, the people that they serve. And they really are serving us. So,
Michael, did you have something else to say?
I just wanted to mention that Andrea had written a comment in the chat box that I think is significant also. Invite your representatives or your senators to your shows. I mean, let them see the work that you're doing. And anybody who's seen some of the work that Helen did at her last school, and that I've seen, the Midsummer Night's Dream production that Andrea did at her school, they see a production like that once and they understand exactly what you're talking about and why you're so passionate about it.
And by the way, I would say on the local level, one of the things I always talk about is school board meetings are public forums. Mm-hmm. And we've talked a lot about building relationships. Go to a school board meeting with good news, to talk about the work that you're doing. And when you do that, when you do have a moment of crisis, a show is at risk, a staff member or whatever, you have built that relationship and they'll know who you are. So you're prepared and you have a community before you and behind you. So, wow. Any last words before we send folks on their way? Oh, one more thing I want to bring up. The students on here. On the Capitol Hill Forum page, you will scroll down and you will see office hours for next week. And both Michael and Sharon are participating in those office hours in different time zones. So, and as well as myself, I'm always available. You'll see the emails there. So if you are having challenges making your meetings or you have questions about the asks, just reach out. We are here to help you. We're here to help everybody. So, excuse me. start working those emails, and Grayson, you'll get the materials you need from me tomorrow. Janine, you as well. Andrea, what's up?
Just wanted to say, Addison and Grayson, I put my email in the chat. Do you want to both shoot me an email for tomorrow? And then we'll plan a meeting on like Sunday or something to start pulling some things together. Okay.
Perfect.
And Mary Ann says, thank you to Sharon, Michael, and Helen for their wonderful insights. So appreciative hearing your comments. So yes. All right. Thank you all for being here. This was a great conversation. I really did. And I'm appreciative of Sharon and Michael and Helen in the various orders that they presented themselves. Helen, especially because she went first when she was able to go first. Anyway, so, thank you
That's
all.
what I wanted to say too.
All right, so I'm stopping the recording. Good night, and I'll see you in the virtual hallways of Congress.